We have the another session on the data mesh architecture in banking by the Mohammed. So we have a Mohammed on this stage.
So can you hear me
Hey
clearly?
Mohammed, welcome to the API Days.
Thank you.
Yeah, stage is all yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate the opportunity and the good organization of the event so far. Yeah, welcome everyone. This session may be a little bit different because it's more about the analytics side of the game. So if you are into how to bring data, how to bring value out of data, mainly in the analytics side, so this session may be relevant for you. And of course, it really enables the open banking in general, the main theme, and we'll see in a bit how. The agenda will look like this. So first of all, because data architecture is a quite complex topic, I want to start with a little bit of a history of data architectures and how this evolved a bit over time. Then the second section will be on why data mesh. Third one is the best practices and the principles of data mesh. And then also fairly, what are the challenges in this domain? So if you look into architecture history, we need to first understand like two different worlds: the online transactional processing and online analytical processing. And I think majority of maybe the software developers are quite familiar, and the software engineers are familiar with the OLTB. So these are the systems that interact with the customer directly, where you need an API, a solid APIs in order to do a post operation, and that's really mission critical, etc. But then in the analytics side, there is also the online analytical processing, those systems where the decision need to be taken based on historical data. You need to do like a trend analysis, you need to do predictive analysis, you want to do a churn model, that kind of activity. And these two worlds are often seen kind of in a siloed way, but these two together are really the combination or the killer combination for a successful data journey. And I think in any organization you will find the two. But the challenge with these two is this slide is just to elaborate more on the characteristics of each one. So the online transaction processing, it's more client facing, mission critical, etc., etc. But on the other side, it touches the report, the protection dashboard, as I explained. But there's this fragile link between those two worlds. It's called the ETL, extraction, transformation, loading, where if you want to get the data out of the transactional system, because this is where everything gets originated towards the analytical side, you need to do an ETL operation or ELT. But the idea is that data need to move out of the system and go towards another system where it's going to be stored there. And that is what really the data mesh is trying to challenge. So back to the history of the architecture. So around the 60s, the concept of data warehousing came into picture, where we bring all the data from the transactional system and put it into one central big data warehouse where we can fit our reporting needs, our let's say requirements for generating analytics, etc., etc. And then this architecture kind of failed a little bit because it's totally centralized architecture. So there's a central team in the middle. IT team is responsible for managing the data and trying to understand the business. And they are the businesses from one world and the IT is from another world, so that it's not like a happy marriage always. So it was kind of a challenging. That's why, for example, the data lake, another architecture came. And in the data lake, it's still, let's say, there's this centralization aspect of it, but then data lake differs because the data that you bring from the transactional system, you put them, let's say, without any transformation, and then figure out the transformation when you read the data. So a concept called schema on write versus schema on read. But let's say more or less these two architectures are spanning on the same style, meaning that there's a data domain that generates data and there's a consumer, but then that data lake or data warehouse is a centralized team. And that's exactly what also when cloud computing really kicked in. This data is just when it kicks in, but cloud computing is a little bit further than that. But then what we've managed to do, because now it's easy to spin infra, etc., then we've created the same architecture, but then on the cloud. But this is really what data mesh is trying to challenge. Data mesh tries to challenge this centralization of the separation between the analytical processing and the transactional processing, and then push that towards the data domain itself, where the data is generated. So you see here, like data domain being a finance or risk or HR or any other department in your organization, they should own, they already own the transactional side, but then also they need to own the analytical side. And that's really, really a mind shift. But since it is also in 2018 kind of broad idea, so it's still not that mature. And we were going to talk about that in the upcoming sequence slides. And of course, there are other architecture paradigms that are coming, like the lake house that tries to bring the best of both lake and warehousing. But the focus of today is about data mesh. So what's data mesh? It's really a network of nodes connecting data together, and it is not really centralized as I explained in the previous things. So it you can look at it like this, instead of one central team and then many people are, or many teams and departments are trying to address needs to it. It's more like, okay, you are a domain, so we push the, the knowledge of course of the business, but also you should own the analytics side as well. And then when another domain wants to get data, they talk to the right people instead of talking to the IT people. And these are like some characteristics. So it challenges that the OLTP and OLAP together, hand in hand, born decentralized and really democratizing the data, because scalability is an issue, especially if you're talking about big organizations. And of course, it has 4 solid principles, which we are going to address in the upcoming slides. So the 4 principles are data domain ownership, data as a product, self-service data platform, and federated governance. And I've chosen this theme because it's actually a journey, right? So there's no really almost right there, because it's, as I said, it's a new architecture. So we all trying to figure out how this is work. So you have to accept that also mentally, that this is a journey. It's not like a classic data warehouse where has been there for maybe 50 plus years. So it's already, everything can be covered in an easy way. And whenever you want to introduce a change, I use this framework that's called the BBTD. So it's like, you want to change an architecture or even anything, a process or whatever, then you need to look to the process, to the people, to the technology, and also what happens to your data. And I'm using this framework to explain to you how you can, or your organization can evolve over time towards data mesh, if that's of interest and of course add value. So this picture will come again after each principle. And then I will try to say, okay, what shall you do as an advice from a people perspective, from a process perspective, and from technology and data, of course. The first principle talks about data domain ownership, and this is by far the most important, let's say, principle, because it's a mind shift that we want to address here. So often in the classical, let's say, architectures, you deliver a data towards the central data lake or data warehouse, and then you as a business or a domain, you say, okay, I've done my part, good luck with it, right? But what data mesh trying to challenge is, no, that is not like throw it and then expect someone else to take care of it. It is actually your own. So the data that gets produced from a financial system is owned by the financial system, both for the analytical side and for the transactional side equally. So really challenges that mindset, and then aims that each domain owns the data end to end, and then be responsible for it, right? Be responsible for the quality of it, be responsible of fixing the gaps if they are. And it's really also inspired by the microservices. So if I want to reflect the previous talk with Amrajad, my colleague, yeah, so data mesh actually came from a microservices architecture, so in a software development, but then more of a data analytics. And that is really the rationale behind this data mesh architecture. And now again, the framework that I spoke about. So what shall you do in all these pillars? So for me, people perspective, I think the data domain ownership is a big mentality shift. So the organization need to prepare their people to be responsible for this new kind of responsibility towards them. From a data perspective, the data that gets generated in the domain need to follow the bounded context kind of meaning that the data that gets generated, it can be contained within your domain, and there is no like finger pointing or whatever. Okay, that's not my data, that's your data. So anything that gets generated in the data domain itself is owned by the whole data domain. And of course, from a process perspective, the organizations need to enable and create the roles that can help this ownership concept to resonate in the people. You can create a strong maybe data ownership program in your company, and then name people by name. You are a data owner for this particular domain, or you are a data steward, and so on and so forth. And of course, from a technology point of view, we need to look into these kind of emerging technologies that can cope with both operational and analytical aspects of the same data in one go. And that's, to be honest, that's quite hard nowadays. And one of the main tips here is to use the CQRS pattern. And in this next slide, I will explain quickly what this means. So CQRS is software architecture, and you may already heard about it, that allows for that application commands and reads are segregated. So if you are committing anything from your application towards your database, your real and the master database, that's fine. That's the normal what we do. But then right away, it triggers another event that stores this the same data, maybe in a different shape, in a different format, towards another read optimized database so that analytics can read from it without hampering the right database, that the main one that's maintainable, that is responsible for the transaction of the data. And that's really, really cool software architecture design. And if you found the right tools to do that, then that will give you a big, big leap towards data mesh. And of course, I'm mentioning the benefits of CQRS and how it can add value, but maybe you can lead that later. The second principle is called data as a product. And that's also a very important concept, because here we're trying to say that the data that gets generated in a domain, you have to deal with it as your own product. And product thinking means that if you have a product, you want to have the best product ever. You want the product that everyone wants to buy. You want the product that gets you revenue. You want the product that you own it and you can fix it as well. And all these kind of, let's say, bullets are important in the thinking as well. Again, linking to the previous one, it's not like, since I'm producing the data and I'm handing it over to someone else, that's not my responsibility. No, it is your responsibility. And you also responsible to create the data as a product in the way that you deal with a physical product. So if you're selling something on Amazon, you don't want to have a bad quality product, right? You want it to be bought, to be on the top, to have a good ranking. The same similar idea that we do in a physical product, but then we need to do it into data. That's really important. And back to the model. So what you need to do in that case, if you want to deal with data as a product, the key highlight here is the people aspect. So if you manage to create, let's say, the roles and responsibility of the people in your organization super clear, that will help you a lot. And that's something that helps a lot in my company. So we came up with a clear ownership definition on who owns what, and each role is obligated to know certain knowledge, to attend certain meetings, to has a mandate to participate in a way that contributes to the product thinking. So it is really, really important that your organization facilitates that. And that is also like an inspiration model that I'm sharing here to the left of the presentation. So feel free to get inspired by it, or even ask me later for details about which what role does what exactly in the organization. The third one is a very important one, because if you really want to aim for decentralization of your data, then you must have a platform that's scalable with this. And this is really a challenge. But luckily, since the cloud is here, then it's a less of a challenge, or still a challenge, but let's say, yeah, a cool challenge, let's put it like that, because the infra is in the tip of your finger nowadays. You can just spin a virtual machine in a few minutes, or a service, or whatever you're trying to do. And that's really big elevation to that thinking. So if you look into a little bit of a pillar here, so let's say that the one data platform team, the team that produced this platform, definitely should be from the IT, but then they should be sort of an enablers for other domains. So they are not no longer, let's say, the people who, for example, spin off a database and then manage it and then responsible for the ingestion or whatsoever. No. So they become as an enabler, so that in the domain come in one of the domains and they want to have a database service, somehow they can click on a button in a self-service manner, and then they get a database without sharing any complexity of how this could work. And then immediately they should see an interface or a connection or whatever, the thing that let them access the database. And that will really help them to do their job without worrying about the platform aspect and the infra and the connection, the networking, and all the underlying hassle. But of course, it gives a good challenge for the IT teams, because then they need to think from enablers perspective rather than like the doers perspective. And that's what we have been doing over quite some years now. So it's really a new level of abstraction of infra, and definitely needs a new category of tools that support that kind of flexibility. And as I said, yeah, the cloud is really helping in that sense. And back to our model of a change, I think infra as a code is the key word here, because nowadays you can easily spin off multiple services and you can have a wrapper around them, and you can build some small automation that through a portal, and okay, I want to have my domain, and then click on it, and it shell script will kick in, and then we'll spin all kind of services and take care of the infra all as in code. And then in few minutes, in an hour, or in a day, you get the environment that you're looking for. And as a success also story from my company, we've done that already. So it can happen like it's already happening. You click on a portal, you want a sandbox environment, you got it in actually 5 minutes. And in that environment, you some services are spinned on by default, some network, some security already maintained as code, so you don't have to rebuild that logic yourself in the domain, and let the domain focus on adding business value rather than any technical challenges. And as I said, we need to create the processes for the IT to become an enabler in that sense. And of course, the people, you need to have like the enthusiastic and enablers and the challenger kind of people who can really activate such a product in the organization. The fourth and the most important principle of data mesh is the federated governance, because now you can imagine, right? If you have like 10 domains in your organization, and let's assume it's successful, and you have a lot of, let's say, data across each domain in the bounded context, but then will it be like, okay, each domain has the choice to do whatever they want with the data? They choose the whatever format they like, or whatever interoperability concept that they want. So this one wants to store it as an Avro, and this one wants to store, let's say, as a zip file, and what's are the common techniques and what kind of transformation that can be applied. You cannot keep it like this, otherwise it would be a big mess. So that's why the federated governance comes into the picture. And what it really entails is that we need to have this common governance across all the domains, where certain principles and standards need to be followed and adhered by the different domains. So, for example, standardization on the data types, standardization on the interoperability of the data, how automation being done, and how, for example, the data movement should look like. And if you can automate as much as you can on that principle, that will give you a big boost towards affiliated governance. And definitely you need also the tools and technology that works like this. And that's also a bit of a gap in the market nowadays, but that's also something, as I said, emerging. So the architecture is fairly new, so now technologies are coping with that. And we have like an inspiration for you also from ABN Amro, where I work for. So we have built kind of our own portal that we call the data marketplace, where you can navigate and do most of these services that we spoke of yourself. And when I speak you, I don't mean the IT people, I mean the domain people. So nowadays, a business person can log in to the portal and then search and find. They will see some features. And when they found the product that they're interested in, they can subscribe or request it. Just put the analogy of Amazon, right? So you search for a product, you see the reviews, you see the owner who produces it, for example, and what quality, and how other thinks of it. Same extreme, same exactly this concept to the data product. And once you like the product, you click on it, you request access to it. So for them, it's just one single journey, but behind the scene, a lot of integration between systems, tons of APIs being fired, but for them, they don't care. And that is the role, let's say, or the evolving role of the IT also, to become really as an enabler. And I'm going also to share some articles about the data marketplace on my LinkedIn. So yeah, you can also follow up, and then there will be also demos, etc. But of course, we don't have much time to go through it. Process-wise, definitely we need to create the processes that aims to the synergy between all the domains. So don't create another silos. So you, instead of the one central team, then you have like multiple central teams. No, no, no. The idea here is to really find a collaboration mechanism and a governance, federated governance, that everyone adheres to, with a little bit of flexibility, of course, in what you do. And that is, let's say, to the next point, that we need to find the right balance between what decision, or which decision you can make locally in your domain, and what decisions that need to be globally. and there is no right and wrong. It depends on each organization and each company strategy, etc., etc. But I think that balance is crucial. And of course, the people aspect, we need to, let's say, also enable or create that those roles that enables the people to really pick up their responsibilities. So if someone is reporting a bad review on the product, in our case it will be a data quality issue, then who will take that up, who will be owner of it, and what kind of processes will be triggered in order to solve it, so you can contribute to back to your product. And then, hey guys, okay, now I fixed my product and I have the next version of it ready for the consumption, and so on and so forth. And of course, based on the consumption patterns that your company provides to your data, could be an API, could be a query, could be a stream, could be a batch. All these need to be maintained by the domain itself, and the federated governance helps in putting this into context and then not to allow, for example, deviations and so on. So the last part of my slides will go about the challenges, because life is not always or things are not always green and blue and stuff like that. So it really requires a specialization, because we are dealing about with a complex piece of architecture. If you want to solve it, then there will be a data redundancy in the beginning, especially if you don't think of a virtualization of data or smart ways to consume the data. So take care of the redundancy and the amount of redundancy that you can create across the organization. The adoption cost, so it can be very costly at the beginning, because as I said, the current tools, they lack this concept. So what you may end up to is that you adapt the technology, but the technology works with a different licensing model, then you will pay more because you are installing the product maybe in 5, 10 domains. But that is something also that I think it will evolve over time. And the last challenge is the complexity. So this is requires, first of all, a buy-in from the whole organization, support, and definitely smart people to implement it. My summary slide, there is no right or wrong in the data architecture. So I've explained the lake, the mesh, the warehouse, and everything in between. So you can choose the best architecture based on your needs. That's in my opinion. Mix and match. Why? If you manage to create or get the best of one of them or the best of all, that is your choice. And keep close eye on the technologies, because it's really going on. And my last quote is, it's a journey, right? So we fall, we get hurt, we can even question ourselves if we are doing the right or wrong thing. But let's say just trust the process, and also collaborate with others. And I think we will reach to a point where the data mesh architecture gets mature and really helps the organization to move forward. Having said that, so my name is Mahmoud. I work for ABN Amro. ABN Amro is a bank in the Netherlands where I'm based. And thanks a lot for having me in the session. And let's see if we have some questions, or even if we have
Okay.
time. I don't know. Yeah.
Hey, Mohammed, thank you very much for sharing about the datas. Yeah, so due to time constraint, we couldn't pick any question. So yeah, if anybody have any question, they will reach out to your LinkedIn.
Yeah, sounds fair. Thanks a lot for having
Yeah,
me, and
thank
good luck.
you. Yeah.